Need the perfect protein for every dish at every day part? With Smithfield pork products, you'll always serve what you love, and they'll love what you serve. To order, visit smithfieldculinary.com/Smithfield.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I am Sam Oches, editor-in-chief at NRN, joined once again on a very cold January day by my colleague, executive editor, Alicia Kelso. Alicia, what's up?
Sam, you look older.
Oh, man. Do I? I feel older. My bones are a little bit more creaky. My joints a little bit more stiff. I celebrated another trip around the sun yesterday. Took a nap because that's what old people do. And it was glorious. My kids were thankfully in school because they missed the first 2 days this week from the cold. And they finally went back to school. And so I was able to enjoy my birthday a little bit more quietly.
Good for you. Yep.
It was
Good
nice.
Yes.
Alicia, before we jump into the news, what's new with you? Any good restaurant occasions, anything food related in your life recently?
I've been in cooking at home because we're going through the polar vortex too.
Yep.
I will say I'm a little sad. I'm supposed to be in Los Angeles for the Taco Bell Live Más Live event, which would have been the second annual Live Más Live event. And that event has been postponed because of the fires, understandably.
Yep.
But I went to that event last year in Vegas, and I think they announced like 30 or 40 new menu items. It was exciting. And so hopefully they'll postpone that, and I will have some significant Taco Bell news sooner than later. So,
related to the Los Angeles fires, we have, as part of our organization, we have a platform called the Nest platform where we bring together food service professionals based on their title. So we have a CEO Nest, a CMO Nest, COO Nest. I have started a Founders Nest for all you founders out there. If you're interested in having a community of fellow founders, we meet virtually once a month and also have a very active WhatsApp channel. Shoot me a note and let me know. Mostly bringing up this story because we had our call this week and had a couple of folks from Los Angeles on the call, and we're just hearing their perspective on what it was like. And they said it is COVID-like. They said because of the fact that people are just not leaving their homes right now because of the smoke. People are working from home or have left the city. It sounds like sales are down about 30%. They were sharing. It just really sounds like a nightmare. They're trying to figure this out, whether or not you can lean into insurance for lost sales, because even if they haven't had destroyed restaurants, they have lost sales because of this disaster. And there's no firm answers here yet. But as an industry, for those of you not in Los Angeles, of course, you and I, Alicia, are not in Los Angeles, but just keep them in your thoughts. Remember that is truly a awful situation, and want to help our colleagues in Los Angeles however we can. If you do have ideas on how you can help them through that, I encourage you to reach out to them directly or reach out to us, and we can relay that message and try to get past this difficult time.
Yeah, I worry. I think between that, and this brutal winter that we've had so far in January, especially with these southern storms. Seeing snow in New Orleans is very bizarre.
Yeah.
And the blizzard conditions that you and I had a couple of weeks ago, I think Q1 is going to be a little bit of a nightmare.
Agreed. Yeah, it's been a brutal, brutal January. I will offer one uplifting thing before we move on to the news. I had the opportunity to go to Philadelphia this weekend for a very special cause. I want to give a shout out to Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation. We had the chance to go to their annual gala. It's called the Lemon Ball in Philadelphia. My whole family went, minus the baby, because I do not want to fly with the baby right now at 10 months. We had a chance to go. Many of you know my son, Jude, had retinoblastoma, which is cancer of the eye, had a 3-year journey. And now he's cancer-free. He's also one eye down. We had his eye removed and he has a prosthetic. He's very happily cancer-free now. But we had the opportunity to go share our story on stage at the Lemon Ball. And it was a very cool opportunity. Shout out to Firebirds, which is an organization that is very deeply committed to Alex's Lemonade Stand, a wonderful full-service chain based out of Charlotte with, I think, 65 to 70 locations. We were their guests. Also, shout out to Applebee's. Applebee's has donated $17 million to this organization. which is really great. Mostly using this soapbox to say, I'm very excited about this organization that's committed to fighting childhood cancers. And if you are looking for a charitable partner, if you are looking for a cause to support, this is a good one. Obviously, with a direct effect on families like my own, has raised $300 million in 20 years to fight childhood cancer. A lot of that goes to grants supporting the doctors in the battle against childhood cancer. If you're interested in being a part of that, please let me know. I am part of the advisory council for the organization and can link you up. It's a really great way to get involved, especially with kids. Lemonade, of course, is the big sort of focal point of this organization. So hosting lemonade stands and donating proceeds from your lemonade on your menu, very easy ways to get involved and raise money. And kids love that stuff. My kids are super excited to participate. We've hosted a couple lemonade stands. So anyway, I'll climb down off my soapbox, but that's a cool organization to be a part of. Something to consider if you're looking for a charitable partner. All right, Alicia, should we talk about the news?
Sure. It was a relatively quiet week, I think, because the inauguration kind of monopolized a lot of the headlines.
Wait a second. Oh, wait. Whoa. We should talk about football, at least briefly.
That's fine. Hey, go ahead.
Monday was a big day.
Michigan still beat Ohio State, so I just don't care.
Yeah, Monday was a big day. We'll just touch on this briefly, but of course Monday was the inauguration, but then also Monday night, more importantly, the Buckeyes beat Notre Dame to be national champions.
Here's where you and I can agree.
Yes.
I'm going to find common ground so I don't murder you in your sleep. It's just nice to have back-to-back Big Ten titles so that we can shut up about the SEC bias.
Yes, I totally agree. ESPN was saying the Big Ten owns college football, so yes, we'll accept that.
It's about time. Yeah.
You and I, as clingers on of the Big Ten, but actually Mac fans, we'll take it secondhand. Okay, football done. College football, for all intents and purposes, ends it for me. We won't talk about the Lions. Sorry, Alicia.
Thank you. That's okay.
We will talk about restaurant news. Let's start by talking about another concept that was dead and buried and is now going to get resurrected. This one is hot and now, a walk-up window drive-through burger concept. No dining rooms, only pickup drive-through. And it was at one point owned by Taco Bell and had 150 locations nationwide. Alicia, I'll admit, I think I am either young enough or having grown up in too rural of a part of the country that this is a new one for me. I am not Chi-Chi's. I knew all about, of course, Chi-Chi's, but Hot and Now, that was new for me. So it is going to make a comeback or wants to make a comeback. Alicia, were you familiar with Hot and Now?
Yes, of course I was. I grew up 20 miles south of the Michigan border. I had this news come in and I got really excited because it's like Chi-Chi's is something that I was very familiar with growing up. It was founded in Kalamazoo, Michigan, so Western Michigan, in 1984. As you mentioned, it eventually grew to 150 locations throughout the U.S. I think it had 15 states. And then again, as you mentioned, in 1990, it was acquired by Taco Bell. And Taco Bell ended up selling it in 1996, and it kind of, changed ownership hands for a lot of years and struggled through those changes, ultimately filing for bankruptcy in 2004. It is now down to one location in a small town in southern Michigan, sort of on the Indiana border. Basically the news that happened this week is an investment firm teamed up with a Michigan developer to buy the name Hot Now, and their intention is to open 2 in Michigan this year and more locations, quote, in the coming years. So the plans are a little superficial now. What intrigues me about this, in addition to my own personal experience with Hot Now, I remember it very fondly as burgers and shakes and fries and very drive-through only. The developer that was part of this, this naming acquisition, it does modular buildings. And so as they're planning to grow Hot and Now again, the plan is to use those modular buildings, and they will only be walk up and drive through. And obviously we've seen a significant growth in that model, from concepts like small sliders, which is leveraging modular buildings to grow their footprint pretty quickly, all the way to traditional concepts like Little Caesars that is leveraging modular buildings to add some diversity to the real estate portfolio. So we'll see what happens here. That single location Hot and Now has a Facebook page. It's pretty active. I was checking it out this week, and they just added DoorDash for the first time, which I thought was interesting and cute,
Quaint.
but very quaint. I'm sure there's not a lot of delivery sales in Sturgis, Michigan, but it does seem to be laying a foundation of what the potential here could be. So we'll see. We'll keep you posted. I will obviously be on this news again because I'm a Hot and Now fan.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but wonder if they saw the news of Steak and Ale, Chi-Chi's, I'm missing one, Bennigan's, for all these brands.
Ground Round.
That's right, Ground Round. They're all trying to go through these resurrections. And hey, respect. I mean, I think as we talked about when we talked about the Chi-Chi's one, there's a real nostalgia factor here, because nostalgia has been in for a while, but I mean, I think there's a real nostalgia around 80s and 90s right now. And certainly as Gen Z starts to take over more and more, whether or not these restaurants, Hot now, it seems like it was probably peaked before they were born. But like to bring something in with that era of nostalgia, I think captures the younger generation's attention. That it, makes for some good social media fodder. So that's I'm guessing why we see a lot of these brands trying to take another crack at it, and especially with a burger brand. Of course, burger business, I think is very average today. It's not like the burger category is lighting anybody on fire, but it is burgers, and there's always a dependable customer base for burgers. However, I would also say, we talked about Shake Shack last week and how much Shake Shack's potential is very limited because, they want to shoot for Five Guys levels. And we talked about the fact that the burger category is very saturated. So I do wonder, again, with this, like, okay, if you want to resurrect and open then 10 locations, great. Or be a regional Michigan, Indiana, Ohio success story, great. But if what you're thinking is, we're gonna really ramp this thing up and open hundreds of them around the country, everybody's gonna love it. Boy, I'm really skeptical of that. Not only because there's just a lot of burger brands out there that you have saturation, but also, I mean, that brand doesn't speak to me. Hot and Now. I mean, I think of Hot and Ready for Little Caesars. Yeah. I don't know. Will that connect with today's consumer like it connected with the consumer of the 90s? I just don't know. The modular building is interesting. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's a lot of efficiencies you can find there. It made me think a little bit of Smalls and the containers, shipping containers that they're using for that, and how you can, if you have a modular and or small footprint model that you can really lean into, you can punch these into, small bits of real estate where otherwise burger brands could not go. So maybe that's one thing they do have going for them. But color me skeptical. I embrace all of these, resurrection stories, but I also say, temper your expectations.
Every week you just rain on parades.
I've been doing this too long, Alicia. I know the horror stories.
You are an old man.
I'm an old man. I'm getting into my get off the lawn phase. What can I say?
I get why you're skeptical, but I also want to reiterate this is a conservative announcement. They want to open 2 this year. There's not a moonshot here. They're not. True. They're not putting out huge target numbers. So I think that they might be doing it in a smart way to feel it out. And we'll see. Well,
and last thing I'll say too about this, because being obviously an Ohioan and understanding the consumer mindset around, the impassioned customer base from Hot and Now in Michigan, of course, my wife being from Lima, QP is a big part of our lives in that every time we're in Lima, QP is a visit. And no offense to any of my friends from QP if you work there or love QP, but I find it to be a pretty standard burger QSR. For somebody coming from outside of Lima. And we go there and I'm happy because I like burgers, but it's not, to me, this is no In and Out, right? But it just goes to show the passion of the local customer base with their homegrown thing. So again, the regional implications for some of these concepts, I think, is bigger than anything. How do you scratch the itch for those people who have the nostalgia for the yesteryear when they used to go to Hot and Now over and over and over again? I think that's where they could find a lot of success. And hey, maybe it will be just icing on the cake if they happen to go more than 2, 3, 4 more locations and find a broader audience. That would be icing on the cake.
Yeah. Fun aside, when I wrote this story, I texted the link to my family, who they still live in Northwest Ohio, and there was equal amount of excitement and disbelief and no way, this is awesome. Yeah. And so I do like that regional draw that you mentioned. I think that'll be a fun little. Sturgis isn't a big town, and it has sustained itself there. So maybe that's what they're looking at, are smaller towns where there's a little bit more white space. There's not much else. I don't know.
I guarantee that one location in the last week has been going gangbusters. Probably on the news. People probably
especially now they have delivery.
just in time for the rush. All right, moving on. Alicia, obviously we talked last week about ICR. You were at the ICR conference in Orlando. Lots of news coming out of that, but one point especially that you are working on a story right now is about how many of the brands present at ICR were enhancing their loyalty programs as we move into 2025, really to take a step back, look at the state of things in restaurants, hoping that inflation has peaked, hoping that economic conditions are improving, needing to, of course, really lean into value and marketing messaging to get customers back in the doors. Loyalty is going to be a big part of that. So I suspect that's probably why a lot of brands are retooling their loyalty programs. But what does that look like? As these brands announce these enhancements, what are they really focusing on?
Yeah, loyalty is just such an interesting topic because I distinctly recall covering it before the pandemic, where brands were sort of making this investment shift to go digital, sort of by necessity, because customers had become, accustomed to on-demand, an Amazon culture, if you will. They just got really used to a more digital environment. Of course, the pandemic changed everything and mandated having a digital presence on mobile phones. And so, 2021, 2022, when I was with a different publication, I remember covering all these stories, adding a loyalty program, enhancing a loyalty program. And that conversation is still happening. And that was really, really clear at ICR when several of the brands were talking about either launching a loyalty program for the first time, maybe because they're in casual dining and it just wasn't really a great fit before, or because they have to update what their digital presence is. So you pull these themes from conferences like that, and loyalty was indeed one of the biggest themes. And it's really interesting because of the environment that we're in now. So, look at Papa John's, for example. It struggled last year. It is now enhancing its loyalty program because a lot of those struggles came from friction. Just from ordering. Papa John's used to be a digital leader, and it just sort of took a back seat while everything else was happening in the past 5 years. And now it's working in earnest to play catch up there. And the loyalty program is priority number one. Yeah. Red Robin launched their loyalty program last year, and they have found tremendous success, gaining both new and lapsed customers. Potbelly spoke about their reimaged program that launched last year. Portillo's is getting ready imminently to launch a program. What's interesting about Portillo's program is it's through a mobile wallet versus an app, and that reduces even more friction. And it'd be interesting to see if we see a little bit more loyalty programs sort of headed in that direction as more customers become familiar with how to use mobile wallets because of, plane tickets, concert tickets, all that stuff. Yeah. And Denny's launched a loyalty program last year, and they're now enhancing it to create more one-on-one relationships with guests, which is a big driver here. Loyalty programs are way more sophisticated than they were just 2 years ago. You can really sharpen your communication and push offers to customers based on their order history, their demographic, all of it. And I think that is how you really get the return on the investment here, and why it's becoming table stakes. Customers want that personalized journey. They want those offers. Brands are able to get that data in return, and they're able to maybe protect their margins a little better because obviously we're very heavily in a value environment. And instead of selling the whole farm, at wholesale value, you can sort of give offers here and there through the members who are the most loyal. So this is a very interesting and very evolving conversation that I think we'll continue to see this year.
It's kind of crazy that we're still talking about this and that there are still brands that have not taken this step into a very digital, forward kind of loyalty program, especially post-COVID. I think COVID really baptized a lot of brands in the loyalty waters because of knowing how much digital ordering had become the future and how much you could take advantage of that, particularly when it comes to collecting data. And so surprising, but hey, better late than never for some of these brands. And when it comes to enhancing them, really like what you said about sort of that reducing that friction. Now, I think we touched on this a little bit last week with Papa John's. And again, as we've established already a couple of times in this episode, I am now an old man, but I cannot tell you how many times, particularly with pizza brands, and this has happened with Papa John's, I get into their app. And I'm the guy who's downloaded all the apps. And so I've got, 4 or 5 different folders worth of food apps on my phone. And I never delete them because I'm like, you never know, I might still use it. And I get into the app and I cannot figure out how to sign in. And I might be a dummy who's just disorganized, but I swear to you, I save passwords on another app and they still don't work. And I'm like fighting this thing and I give up, but I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to order without my loyalty. Or sometimes I'm going to another restaurant where I know I can get my loyalty to work. I'm the exception. I don't know, but you have to make loyalty programs as easy as possible. I know that Seven Brew we've talked about before. Seven Brew uses SMS. Right? They just use your phone number. I beg more of you to do this because I will never forget my phone number. I have a terrible memory and I might forget passwords, but I will not forget my phone number. Maybe that has different implications. I don't know. I like where Portillo's is going with the wallet. Granted, I fly a lot, so I am very acquainted with my Apple Wallet and how to use that. But I do have Jimmy John's in my wallet. Jimmy John's is one brand that does the wallet loyalty, and it's just very easy peasy. So if you want to maximize your loyalty program, I guess, which is all to say is consider the old farts like myself and how we need it to be easy. You need to dumb it down for us sometimes. Take as many steps out of this as possible because nobody doesn't want to use loyalty. If you have an opportunity to earn points and get rewards, you're going to take it. But if you're like, I got to go through, got to find my password, got to put in my password. I have two-factor, whatever. Like, no, just make it as easy as possible or I'm going to skip it. Okay.
It's also embarrassing to ask your Gen Alpha kid for help. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm getting there. I'm sure I'm going to get there pretty soon. Oh, Dad, as she rolled her eyes. Okay, one brand that has been talking about loyalty and enhancing their loyalty is Denny's. And I want to stop at Denny's too, because this is not the only thing that Denny's announced as part of ICR. They also had made news a couple months ago where they announced that they had identified 150 underperforming stores that they would close. They have since closed 88 of those, and they will be working throughout this year on closing the rest of them. However, while that does sound doom and gloom, CEO Kelly Valade also mentioned that they had plans to get back to net unit growth by 2026. They're planning on enhancing their loyalty program, as we said. What should we expect from Denny's? Is this a bad thing that they're closing these restaurants, or should we expect brighter days ahead for Denny's?
I don't think it's a bad thing. We've talked about this in the past several times on this podcast where closures make for some sexy headlines, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily bad moves. And in this case, I think that's exactly the case. Denny's, as Kelly Valade said in her ICR presentation, they identified these 150 underperforming locations because they were underperforming. And, she basically said that Denny's, as a legacy brand, needed a reset coming out of the pandemic. And when she came on board, one of the first things she did was evaluate that portfolio. And sometimes you got to cull for the plant to grow healthier. And that's what's happening here. A lot of these locations are in markets that have changed. Maybe demographics shift, maybe there were, people who moved in, moved out, and it wasn't their consumer set anymore. That is a typical cycle in the restaurant industry. I think that the thing that is just striking here is the number's big. 150 is a pretty big number, about 10% of the Denny system. But this move, this effort, while she said, of course, it's tough work, it should also get the company back to net growth by 2026. That's the goal here. And the long range outlook for the company includes flat to 1% net unit growth each year, ideally driven by higher average unit volumes, which she anticipates to be about $2.2 million, excuse me. At the end of 2023, which is the most current data that we have from Technomic, they were 1.9 million. So that's not a huge stretch. And the work that Denny's is doing to get to 2.2, I think, is I don't want to say low hanging fruit, because that's certainly, they're all, big investments. But like you mentioned, the loyalty program is a big part of this. To get that increased frequency, to ideally expand the guest base here. Denny's is also going through a pretty comprehensive remodeling program, shrinking the box, like many brands are doing, which is obviously more cost effective. And as she mentioned, this remodeling program requires a $250,000 per restaurant investment that is, quote, delivering big. What does that mean? Denny's completed about 24 locations last year. Those remodeled locations yielded a 6.4% sales and a 6.5% traffic increase. So They're going to accelerate this remodeling program because they're yielding significant results. Denny's is also finding a lot of footing in this value environment that we're in, and is re-engineered their 2468 value menu, added a $10 category, and it's done really well. The final point that I will make, they bought Kiki's, which is in that really hot brunch category in 2022, and now they're able to find a lot of synergy with Kiki's, and that is giving existing Denny's franchisees another opportunity to also grow. So I think that's a really intriguing piece of this, a smaller piece of the story, but an intriguing piece of the story nonetheless. And it's really starting to create a lot of momentum at this brand, and I see upside here.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about Kiki's in particular is, one of the biggest headwinds I think Denny's probably faces here is this is a legacy brand in an increasingly saturated but exciting category. So the competition for Denny's is stiff. I mean, especially when you look at First Watch and everything First Watch has been doing. You have other players like Another Broken Egg Cafe, Eggs Up Grill, lots of these breakfast brunch concepts coming into the market. So Kiki's is a fascinating part of the Denny story, especially because for me, I feel like that's their ability to keep up in this space where there are these more modern, upscale at least, and maybe I would say in like ambiance types of concepts, and they're able to play it at that level, but also glean learnings from that. Kiki's is, I'm sure, giving them lots and lots of data about the higher end opportunity here in breakfast, brunch, and lunch that Denny's can learn from. But I think, to just echo your point here too, Alicia, the fact that closing 150 locations and then getting back to net unit growth and opening and being more strategic about those openings is healthy. That's a healthy thing for a restaurant company. And so to understand that in order to grow again, sometimes you've got to go sort of, one step back to take two steps forward. That's what it looks like Denny's is doing here. And again, for a legacy chain with such a stiff competition today, I think particularly noteworthy and a tough decision for Kelly Valade and team, but probably the right one. So will be very interesting to see what comes of that. All right, let's move into our extra serving of this episode. We are going to be joined by one of our colleagues to talk about Starbucks. Starbucks announced that they're going to be making layoffs. Brian Niccol announcing a few months into his tenure as CEO that there would have to be some culling of their staff. And to join us in talking about that is senior editor Joanna Fantozzi. Joanna, welcome to Extra Serving.
Hello.
Joanna, before we get into Starbucks, you also went to ICR. Any top level kind of perspective you want to talk about that you learned at ICR? What kind of takeaways you had?
I definitely feel like my big takeaways from ICR were value and simplicity. I do feel like I kept hearing phrases like get back to basics in multiple presentations. And I think that a lot of companies are trying to do that. I think that there was maybe a lot of overly complicated operations. Specifically, it seemed like on the menu side, a lot of brands want to dial back on things like crazy LTO schedules. And also they want to improve value perception because a lot of customers didn't go out to eat last year. So I think that that's kind of the vibe that I got from ICR. I think that Alicia and I both discussed this, but it was kind of this tepid optimism and hopefulness, but with some trepidation.
Well, we are very excited to, at the end of this episode, the two of you were present in Orlando for the ICR conference and did speak to some executives at the restaurant companies there to get their viewpoint on their brands and the year ahead for their brands. We're very excited at the end of this episode. Stay tuned after we wrap our conversation because we will share some of that perspective that you guys got from those executives. So stay tuned for that. But before we get to that, we do have to transition into talking about Starbucks. Starbucks, of course. Hey, we've been talking about Starbucks a lot lately because ever since Brian Niccol was brought over from Chipotle to serve as CEO in the fall, he's been making changes left and right. Obviously, has a plan for this brand and he's sticking to it, and we'll see where it goes. But the next phase in the plan seems to be cutting back on, trimming the fat, let's say. He's announced that they're going to make some layoffs at the corporate level, especially about 16,000 employees at Starbucks corporate, over 300,000 total. But it seems like they're really going to focus on those 16,000 corporate employees and focus in on anybody who's not really attached to a big project or some kind of management of something in this Starbucks system. It seems like they've identified as being potentially a target for layoff. Joanna, what do you make of this decision by Brian Niccol and Starbucks to make these layoffs?
Well, first of all, I actually do really want to point out that I think that that Niccol is making a really interesting strategy here by being so forthright and openly communicative. Not that Starbucks wasn't really doing that before, but it was mostly about the good stuff. And I think that, they've done this. He's done this now a couple of times. He did this ahead of the last earnings call, but being like, hey, look, I know these look bad, but I'm kind of getting ahead of the bad news. I think that's probably a good strategy, just in general, because, I'm sure some sort of media outlet, maybe us, would have come out with that these layoffs were happening, and then they would have been reactive. So that's just an aside.
The media always coming out with a bad headline.
So I do think that this isn't scary news necessarily to me. Obviously, layoffs are never good. But like I said, I think it's a good sign that they're being honest about it. And also the fact that it doesn't really come across to me as panic layoffs, like we really need to make money. It's like you said, it's kind of trimming the fat, maybe reducing some redundancies. And the fact that they're also simultaneously investing a lot of other things, including like he mentioned in this letter, the parental leave. It just feels like this is really just part of the clean sweep that Niccol is trying to make company wide rather than, a red flag. And, he's changed a lot since he's come on board. I actually tried to figure this out. I think it's 5 months now, and that's kind of what he's paid the big bucks to do. So I think this is really
big bucks.
That's funny.
Huge.
And I actually just checked because I was curious if investors reacted to this news, and they didn't really. In fact, the stock was kind of stable. And in fact, now the past few days, it's on the upswing even more. So, I don't think that investors are too worried about this either. So yeah, I don't necessarily think this is a red flag.
It's interesting. You brought up, this is the second or third open letter he has sent in his time, which I agree with you is a good strategy. Get ahead of it, try to control the narrative before the pesky media takes over. But I also wonder with this one, what the culture in Starbucks is like right now, because if your CEO says there are layoffs coming, tends to be a negative for everybody who starts fretting for their job. So I do wonder with this, he's able to get ahead of it, because if we all of a sudden found out, oh my gosh, thousands of people at Starbucks were laid off and they just found out, that it sounds really big, bad, scary, versus if he says, hey, it's coming, just ready for it, then it softens the blow, I think. But I just wonder how that might affect culture. Alicia, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, how can it not? I mean, everybody's probably paranoid right now. I would be. March 1st, I must get productive before March 1st. But look, Joanna's right. This is his directive, is to come in here and right this giant global ship, right? He's got really big expectations. Profitability is critical. Getting traffic back is critical. Getting share back is critical. As more players jump in, there's a lot of work here. He's done a lot of work, but there's, it just seems to be scratching the surface. What intrigued me the most about this particular announcement was that he basically said it's slowing us down. We're too big. It's slowing us down. So that sort of indicates the urgency that he has to right that ship. And look, restructures are not unusual in this business. And Starbucks has had really significantly down quarters. And so that should be no surprise that this is a logical next step. McDonald's went through a restructure shortly after I joined. I think it was January of 23, and basically came out and said the same thing. We're going to go through some difficult decisions in the spring because we want to become more nimble, more streamlined. We are a global company and we cannot work in silos anymore. So a few things are at play here. One, to get the ship in the right direction, and two, to function as a global company in as many markets as Starbucks is in, it does seem like almost a necessity to change the structure that it's been, or that it's had for so many years. It's a different ballgame now. And as Joanna mentioned, a lot of these things were duplicative, as he mentioned in his note. And so this, I think, will be an interesting development come March 1st to see what the scope, what the impact is, and how many people will be impacted. I was surprised that shares didn't really budge after this announcement. I would have thought that they would have gone up.
They did eventually. It was like they didn't react on the day of or the day after, but then now they're going up the past few
Probably
days.
because it was a late Friday news drop, and we all love those.
Oh yeah, we know what they're doing there. That is for sure. Yeah, go ahead, Joanna.
I was just gonna say there's actually some clues, because I reread the letter. There's some interesting clues in the letter, and that point to much of these, or rather many of these layoffs may be coming around the global team. Because he says, our initial work has rightly been focused on the US and Canada. However, we also need to examine the role, structure, and size of our support teams around the world. So to me, that says that a lot of these may be coming from the global support teams. And I wonder if this could mean divestment in China. I don't know. That I might be looking into that too much, but.
No, that's interesting. I mean, one of the knocks against Brian Niccol when he went over to Starbucks was that he did not have that international experience at Chipotle that is so key to what Starbucks is doing. And, who knows what comes next for Starbucks, but the international business having to play a very big role. One last thing I would say, too, just the fact that they've really homed in on corporate employees. When I recently spoke with Twin Peaks CEO Joe Hummel on my podcast Takeaway, he said this thing that I think is applicable here, which is, your headquarters doesn't make money, your stores make money. And, you have to really invest in where the cash register is ringing, more so than you can invest in some of that G&A, headquarters type expenses. Of course, so a company like Starbucks, way different than a company like Twin Peaks, and you have supply chain and roasting and all sorts of things to consider. But for me, that's where what I think, which is like to get back to basics, which Joanna, you were mentioning, as a kind of a theme from ICR. If Starbucks is going to get back to basics, and they've already announced, improvements in hospitality, improvements in speed of service and convenience, and taking away that friction at the store level, I think they have to really invest in where that money is primarily coming in. And our money's primarily coming in in its coffee shops across the country. So if that's where the money's coming in, that's where you had to focus your investments. So that to me was the big takeaway I took from that. Okay, let's get into our lightning round of this episode. You have seen many restaurant companies you guys saw at ICR that were presenting sort of their blueprint for the year ahead of us. I want to know from you guys, what's one company that you think is most exciting to watch in 2025, whether at ICR or not? What is one company that you think has a lot of exciting irons in the fire and stands a good chance to experience growth this year? Joanna, what are you going to go with?
I think for me, this is going to be Shake Shack. Maybe it's because I don't cover them quite as often, but new CEO, they're getting a lot of new executives, and I just think that it's a really interesting year for them, and I think that they are going to be going through a lot of changes, and they're expanding a lot. So they're one of, I know that there were a few burger brands that didn't do so hot last year, we know, and they are just far and above and beyond the one of the most exciting in the burger category. And so I do think that, yeah, and they were one of the few to have news at ICR. So,
well, we'll see how they deal with this new competition from Hot and Now. Alicia, what do you think is the most
I'm sticking with ICR companies because they're fresh on my mind, and I will wait until after earnings to have a broader answer. But I think Portillo's has a lot of cool things happening right now. The shrinking of the building, I think, is one of the biggest stories that we can possibly be talking about, and it's well overdue. And so I am bullish about them. I love how the Red Robin comeback story is finally starting to come to fruition. I know GJ Hart, he came out of retirement just to do this, and he has literally turned over every rock and stone at that company to make those changes. And it's kind of fun to see the company gaining a lot of traction from that.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to give you one that's already on a roll and is likely to continue on a roll, and that's Dutch Bros. I believe Dutch Bros opened a couple hundred locations in 2024, 200 plus, I believe. And I just don't see an end in sight for their growth because there's still many, many more markets for them to get into. And how can you say no to coffee and the potential there? So for me, Dutch Bros has a lot coming for it in 2025. Okay, that was our lightning round. With that, we are going to hand things off to you guys in the interviews you guys did at ICR. Joanna Fantozzi, Alicia Kelso, as always, thanks for joining me on Extra Serving.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Alicia Kelso, NRN's executive editor, and I had the chance to recently talk to Michael Beecham, president of California Pizza Kitchen, who shared with me why the company is getting back to franchising and its near-term growth plans, including why it's leaning a bit more heavily into vending machines.
We're growing again. We're growing in a lot of different areas. We're doing a lot of cool, interesting things. And I couldn't be more excited to be here.
I know that you are making some big changes in the 13 or 14 months that you've been there, including the ignition of franchising. Why are you taking that approach with this company?
You know, there are companies who do a phenomenal job of being a corporate-only system because they have the scale to be able to do that. And then there are companies, honestly, CPK probably is late to the game. We should have been shifting to a blended system a decade ago. Unless you have the scale in all of these different markets to be able to leverage that to run a really efficient system, then having a blended franchise system is the right approach. So California, we're keeping.
Okay.
It's our home market. It's where we were founded. It's our first name. And we know how to do it well. And very few companies say, I want to own in California every franchise, but we really understand that market well.
CPK has tried to franchise before, in fact, fairly recently, obviously, before you came on board, and it just didn't take off.
Right.
What's different now?
Before they announced it and they went the traditional route of putting it out there and seeing it, going to some of the franchise shows, which are all very good, serve a great purpose. And we took a completely different approach. Rather than being reactive and passive and seeing who shows up at our door, we then said, we want to target who we want to partner with and set a very clear profile. So I'll give you a great example. And I told it on stage this morning about our partner in Las Vegas. They operate 100 restaurants. multiple brands, deep operational experience, great infrastructure from a G&A standpoint, have the capital to be able to grow Nevada and Utah, which is what they're taking, to its capacity. But most importantly, when we were going through the courting process with them, we invited them to dinner, and their kids came to dinner.
Okay.
And they were teenagers, and I'm sitting there talking to Sanji. Yeah. Well, their kids who are teenagers are sitting next to our head of culinary, and they're going back and forth talking about every menu item that had ever gone on or off the menu in their lifetime, which tells me, you don't need to tell me you're a fan. I know you're a fan.
Yeah.
And they love the brand. So that's how you pick apart a franchise relationship's like a marriage.
Are you putting timelines and numbers in terms of target out there? You're about 131 now in 27 states. You've got about, some international. Obviously, you've got a non-traditional footprint. And we're in the mall.
We're growing tremendously on that.
So talk to me about what the potential is here, especially as you unlock this franchising, program that you're doing.
The beauty of this, because we're not doing this as a way to raise money or as an asset transfer exercise, because we're doing this because we truly believe this is the right term, long-term strategy, we're able to say no more than yes and make sure that we get the right deals. I would expect we're looking at probably about 6 years to get to 3 or 4 deals a year to get to refranchising outside California throughout the U.S. Now, at the same time, in parallel, we're having discussions where people are showing up and saying, I want to market, but you don't have an existing store there. Maybe we were there 10 years ago. So that's not a refranchising deal. That's a white space domestic franchise deal. So although that's not our priority, we're opportunistically looking at, if we find the right partner in the market that we're not at, in parallel franchising.
Okay.
Internationally, we've always been franchised. So we are shifting our strategy there to more core market that are scalable. And non-traditional, I think, is probably the most exciting.
So tell me this, with that format opportunity then, as you sort of kind of push the gas here on non-traditional, and in particular airports, that seems like an opportunity to translate elsewhere. I mean, is this something you would contemplate as standalone, fast casual?
2 things that we're working on that are very exciting. One of them is we've been spending the last year and a half looking at the fast casual space and how we can play a part of that.
Nothing to announce, though.
Nothing to announce yet.
But looking at it.
Okay. I think we've got something that's going to be pretty exciting coming down pretty soon, and you'll hear about that this year.
I trust you'll keep me posted.
The second thing is, and this we can announce, is we are entering into the vending area. And this is something that 5 years ago, we wouldn't have touched because the quality wasn't there that we could be proud of.
Yeah.
And it's really about the intersection of the right timing with the right technology. Technology in food service equipment has come so far that now we can produce a product out of a machine. We hate the word vending because it denotes think about chips and soda.
Oh, yeah.
But we'd like to say it's an automated restaurant. But we can, in 3.5 minute cook time, give you a pizza or a pasta that is restaurant quality in an environment where there's a food desert and where we can get closer to our consumers in a way that others can't. And other people have tried this. You all have written stories about other brands that'll have, and especially in the pizza space, they talk about doing pizza vending machines. We watch closely to see how they've done it, and we think that we learned from them.
Okay.
A lot of them, it's because a manufacturer showed up at their door and said, I've got this cool product. We want to use your brand on it. But at the end of the day, the quality wasn't there or the cook time was too long. We went and analyzed 32 different manufacturers. And there are actually 32 different manufacturers of pizza vending machines around the world.
I believe you.
And we looked at a wish list of what we wanted between execution of product, the financial part of that model, the ability to deliver on all cylinders on this. We've narrowed down to 2 tests that we're running with 2 different machines. They will be in airports first quarter, and we will analyze and tweak to look at a bigger rollout.
It's first quarter now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we already have the machines.
Okay.
We're already where are you going to start to see these? You're applying middle of the day, which is great. But if you were in an airport at 9, 10 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
airports, because of labor costs, are closing their restaurants earlier, but they've got a terminal full of people.
Yeah.
And so in all the airport RFPs, they're asking us for 24-hour food options.
Okay.
Limited service hotels. When we stay at hotels nowadays, restaurants aren't open anymore. Even full service hotels don't seem to have restaurants anymore.
Right.
It's not a winning proposition for them. And so if you go to the dumpster, all you see is DoorDash and Uber Eats bags. Well, the airports, the hotel's not getting any part of that and of that revenue. And the cost to order delivery nowadays continues to rise as Uber Eats and DoorDash are chasing profitability in their model. So if we can put a machine into a hotel and have the hotel be able to stock it and operate it and be able to give a food option for people that's restaurant quality under $20, that's a huge scalable model.
Hi, this is Alicia Kelso, NRN's executive editor. I had the chance to talk to Bob Wright, CEO of Potbelly, at the recent ICR conference about several topics, including new menu innovation, Potbelly's value proposition, and its focus on digital marketing platforms. Here he is sharing a bit more about the company's new stage gate process for menu innovation.
How have you made progress against operations as you make these innovations happen, this new news, and how are you making sure that you maintain that well-oiled machine that you put into place when you came on board?
Yeah, all those, you have a good memory. We took 60 SKUs out of the menu, or out of the shops when we redid the menu back in 2021. And so we're very careful about SKU creep. And the real test of doing any of this is incrementality. If we can't get incremental traffic, incremental sales, incremental growth out of these ideas, then they're interesting but not relevant. And we're going to stay away from those. We continue to use pre-post net control testing before we put something in, especially before we roll it nationally. I can tell you in 2024, we implemented a true typical brand move that he did not have in place, but insights-driven front-end 4-stage stage gate process for product innovation and development. That means that, stage gate 1 and stage gate 2 is getting, very critically reviewed by the operators, by the teams, by the integration, and, placement. Do we have room on the line? Is it going to have a velocity that saves any waste? And are there other ways that we can use it? Part of the reason we have 2 pork sandwiches is it helps velocity on pork. And, together they mix really well. And, one of them would have been fine. The other one probably would have been fine together. We don't have the issues that we might have with a whole muscle protein like that. So once you're over that line, well, then it's actually not a big deal at all. It's just a protein on the line. And we make the sandwiches when the customer orders them anyway. So I'm reaching to this bin instead of this. I have to do that 6 times. We're not planning on it. But, I run out of pan space, so there's that.
But that stage gate is new.
It is, and it's really robust. I was in Chicago last week reviewing some product work at stage gate 3, which is the go no go decision to go to market test.
Okay.
So
yeah. And I assume you're going to continue that stage gate in 25 adjustments. Any adjustments that you're thinking of?
I think the process feels like it's working hard for us. When, like a lot of companies, when COVID came along, we not only did what we did to rationalize the menu, we rationalized a lot of G&A then. So all of that innovation talent was gone. Sure. All the insights talent was gone. And David, I'm really pleased with the way David Daniels put that back. He started with insights first, so that we didn't have the capability to start working on product innovation if we didn't have a sense of where the customer was, where those consumer trends were. And for us, and I think you and I have talked about this with digital investments. We're kind of overly pragmatic about things we invest in and what the returns. And I'm impatient. And so, and I say I mean, we as a brand, our leadership team wants those returns. And so, we think adjacency and and yet distinction are going to be really important with food items. The craft refreshers, the Potbelly craft refresher, those are adjacent. They're dispensed, which people love. Drinks over ice, make my own, maybe blend the two flavors. That's kind of fun, but it's not so far afield like an afternoon coffee product that would be a big stretch for our brand.
Sure.
This is a lemonade. It's a delicious product. Fits right in with lunch and with dinner. So that adjacent product, but it creates incrementality. Same thing with pork.
So you're not going to compete with Cosmets this year?
Well, I think so.
Need the perfect protein for every dish at every day part? With Smithfield pork products, you'll always serve what you love, and they'll love what you serve. To order, visit smithfieldculinary.com/Smithfield.